So firstly, what's your view on circularity principles really in terms of supply chain, in is that something you see often and is really good, or actually is it quite an alien thing that as an industry in the sectors certainly that we touch needs a lot of work?
I think the maturity of that topic by sector is quite different.
Yeah.
I've spoken to businesses in the last week or so where they're actually focused with industrial equipment to almost break down the idea of a product, which might be, a vehicle with an engine and tyres and some, recovery equipment on it or something like that, to break it down into those component parts. And it's actually okay to have quite an old chassis with a brand new engine in it, as an example, because that is the best approach for that industry to keep their service running in the best way possible from an environmental perspective. I think the other example, that I'm really familiar with is, the repair of sort of consumer electronics. If you increasingly in our journey here at Unipart with the mobile phone, we started a journey back in 2005, 26, where we spent a lot of time repairing phones and keeping them going. But they were a consumable item, and actually we were repairing a phone whilst it was in warranty, but as soon as it came out of warranty, you went and picked a new one up.
Yeah.
I think what people see these days is that they pick up their iPhone or whatever device that they're using, and the aim is to keep it longer. It's part of your life, isn't it? You get used to it. And to maintain those sorts of devices by replacing screens, batteries and things like that, then I think that's probably where businesses should go. And but I think there are other areas that are still really throwaway in terms of the consumer, and I think that it's those industries that really need to focus on what is the right thing to do.
Yeah. The fashion industry often gets a bad rep in that sense, doesn't it?
Yeah.
And it's cost that's the driver there, right?
Yeah.
For the majority of those circumstances, cost has been the one there. Yeah, you go into circularity and then you look at reuse, refurbish, recycle, which are all ways of extending out the life cycle. We've spoken a bit there about reuse and refurbish. Recycle is often the one that's hardest because you are having to do processes again on a material or something to make it fit for purpose again in its new its new life cycle, basically. And that's often where cost comes in quite a lot. So that's always the point at the minute where people choose between going with the old traditional route of raw material extraction or new. I think it's cost that's been a result of maybe lack of adoption in a number of other industries. There's probably technical arguments around that as well, around quality of materials for very complex supply chains and things. But I think cost is a big driver. The interesting one will be, I think, greenhouse gas emissions, CO2, is a potential entry point of a metric that will influence cost and value in a different way. I think it's the first environmental indicator that might play in that market space, because, again, not to go into the technical details of it, you can reduce the allocated emissions to certain products if you reuse it in others. And that could be a driver. If we get emissions trading schemes going in a big way, where CBAM's coming in, EU and things like that, it may then be worth the investment in the recycling processes of it to make it reused. That
is with CBAM and which is essentially a carbon tax going across a border. If that's the start of something that you've sort of like just explained there, where it becomes much more valuable to reuse components and materials within future products, or have your product designed in a way that allows interchangeability, then I think that is probably, there is a little bit, compliance drives behaviour change, doesn't it, in the right way. If compliance changes behaviour to do things in the right way for the environment, rather than to duck underneath a bar to sort of like keep the cost as low as it possibly can be, then I think that there is some real opportunity and a different way of designing products and services and providing them. And but it's a societal thing, right, as well, because the other big driver to consumerism is brand, isn't it? And when your version 5 gets replaced by a version 6, and that's the whiz bang that's going out there on adverts and marketing campaigns and things like that, then corporations are encouraging people to take that type of product. If the emphasis was more around circular economy and being able to reuse and enhance products that are already in place, then that's quite a big step. That would be a game changer. I don't see any steps forward in that area at the moment. I think we're sort of in a world of making good in the environment that we're in.